I hired a woman to clean the house while my entire family was out. About an hour later, she called me and whispered, "Ma'am, is there anyone else in the house?" I froze. "No. Why do you ask?" "There's a woman upstairs." I started trembling. "Get out of there right now." I called the police and drove home at top speed. That day, I woke up with a plan to clean the house myself. I wanted everything to be spotless, especially before the coastal rains returned. When the humidity makes everything feel heavier and dirtier, I rolled up my sleeves, grabbed a rag, and stood in front of the living room window, ready to start with enthusiasm. As I wiped the glass, the phone in my pocket vibrated. I looked at the screen. It was Yvette, my childhood friend, whom I hadn't seen in many years. Her cheerful voice filled the phone, letting me know she would only be passing through Savannah, Georgia for one day and wanted to invite me for coffee. My heart warmed hearing her familiar voice. Ayete and I shared so many memories, running through the fields, staying up late, talking about our dreams. How could I say no? But thinking about all the cleaning I had to do, I hesitated for a moment. I couldn't leave the house like that. Then I remembered Brianna Parrish, the 20-something woman who lived in the alley near my place. She was slight, kind-natured, and needed some extra work to pay for her college classes. I called her and she immediately accepted, grateful for the opportunity. I gave her precise instructions. Clean the study, scrub the stairs to the second floor, and above all, be careful with the old dusty shelves belonging to my husband, Jerome. I left her a spare key and asked her to lock up tight when she finished. I drove to the Magnolia Tree Cafe where Ayeta was waiting for me. We sat under a sprawling live oak tree. She told me about her life in the city, about her children who were already grown. I told her about Jerome, his work as a published novelist, and my tranquil, though sometimes empty days. We laughed, remembering old times. In the middle of our chat, my phone rang again. I saw the number. It was Brianna. I smiled, thinking she was calling to say she was finished. But when I answered, I didn't hear her usual shy voice. Instead, I heard agitated breathing as if she was trying to contain a panic. "Miss Simone," she whispered in a shaky voice I could barely hear. "Is there anyone else in the house?" My heart stopped. "No," I replied, trying to sound calm. "I'm having coffee. My husband is at the publisher's and won't be back until tonight. What's going on, Brianna?" There were a few seconds of silence on the other end. I could only hear her ragged breathing. Suddenly, her voice broke. "There's a woman on the second floor. I was cleaning the stairs and I saw her. She was wearing a long white dress with messy hair. She walked down the hallway and disappeared into the last room." Her words were like an ice-cold knife in my chest. I tried to stay calm, but the hand holding the phone was shaking. My first thought was that someone had broken in. The house was over 70 years old, but we always locked everything carefully. How could someone have entered? I apologized to Yvette, telling her I had an emergency. She looked at me worried, but I just shook my head, unable to explain more. I told Brianna on the phone, "Brianna, get out right now. Lock the door and wait outside. I'm on my way." I called the police while driving, my voice cracking with anxiety. I explained there was an intruder in the house, trying to provide details even though my mind was a whirlwind. I tried to call Brianna again, but she didn't answer. Every unanswered ring made my heart pound harder, as if it were trying to escape my chest. I imagined the worst, that something had happened to her or that the intruder had attacked her. That day, the streets of Savannah seemed endless, even though I was flooring the accelerator. When I arrived home, a police cruiser was already parked in front of the door. Brianna was sitting hunched on the front step, her face pale, her eyes wide open, filled with terror. I rushed toward her, hugged her, and asked anxiously, "Are you okay? Did you see anything else?" Brianna just shook her head, her lips pressed together as if she couldn't utter a single word. Two police officers, one middle-aged with a serious look and a younger one, walked out of the house. They said they had checked every corner, every room, every closet, under the beds, even the backyard shed. There was no one. There were no signs of forced entry. All doors and windows were locked without a single scratch or strange mark. I sighed with relief, but the feeling of uneasiness didn't leave me. Brianna recounted, still trembling. "I swear I saw her, Miss Simone." She didn't look real. She was like a shadow. I won't dare go up to the second floor again. I stroked her shoulder to console her, but a doubt began to grow inside me. This house was over 70 years old. It had belonged to Jerome's family before we moved in. The brick walls, the creaking wooden doors, the dark corners, they had always made me feel like they were hiding something. But I couldn't imagine a woman. Just then, I heard Jerome's sedan pull up the cobblestone driveway in front of the house. He got out, his face surprised to see the police car and me next to Brianna. I took his arm and quickly told him what happened. I expected him to be as worried as I was, to want to find out what was going on, but Jerome only smiled faintly, a smile I rarely saw. He approached Brianna, patted her shoulder, and said in a soft, almost mocking voice, "You must have been tired, honey, and confused the sun's reflection with a shadow. Our house is old. It has many corners that play tricks on the eyes." Brianna lowered her head without saying another word. I looked at her, my heart heavy. I knew she wasn't a fanciful girl. She was hard-working, honest. She had no reason to invent something like this. But Jerome's gaze, his calm, began to make me doubt myself. Maybe he was right. I apologized to the police for making them come out. A bitter embarrassment rose in my chest. I paid Brianna, asked her to go rest, and promised I would call her if I needed her. 3 months later, I officially retired. There were no more rushed mornings getting ready for work, no endless meetings, no days racing against deadlines. The old house in Savannah became my world, but the change of pace kept me awake at night. Every night, I stayed up staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock ticking in the darkness. During those nights, I began to notice strange sounds coming from the attic. At first, they were slight noises, as if something small accidentally fell to the floor. I convinced myself it was the wind blowing through the old windows or the wood creaking due to the changing weather. But little by little, the sounds became clearer, more vivid. I heard something like a chair scraping across the floor, slow and heavy, then light but constant footsteps, as if someone were walking back and forth. Sometimes I even heard the rustle of paper, as if someone were silently turning the pages of a book. I told Jerome one morning as we had breakfast in the kitchen. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I couldn't help feeling uneasy. "Honey, I've been hearing noises in the attic lately. It's not the wind. It sounds like someone is up there." Jerome yawned without looking up from the newspaper in his hands. He replied distractedly, "It's just rats, Simone. Our attic is old. It's full of stuff. It's mouse paradise. I'll buy some traps tomorrow, set them, and that's that." The next day, just as he promised, Jerome brought home some large metal traps, the kind that make a loud snap when they close. He placed them at the foot of the ladder leading to the attic, right beneath the old wooden door. "There," he said, dusting off his hands. "Now you can sleep soundly, my love." Oddly, the noises disappeared completely after that. No more footsteps, no scraping chairs, no rustling paper. I sighed with relief, convincing myself that Jerome was right. Maybe it was just mice and I had worried too much. But then strange things started happening, things impossible to ignore. One afternoon, I bought a package of spicy sausage from the local market, my favorite for its intense flavor. Jerome, on the other hand, had never liked anything spicy. He wouldn't even taste it. I carefully wrapped the sausage in paper and stored it in the refrigerator, planning to enjoy it over the weekend. The next morning, when I opened the door, I froze. A large chunk was missing. The cut was irregular, as if someone had sliced it off in a hurry. I asked Jerome, who was reading the newspaper in the living room, "Did you take some of the sausage from the refrigerator?" He looked up, frowning, as if my question was absurd. I felt like trying something spicy yesterday, so I cut off a little piece," he replied distractedly. "It was good, actually." I stood motionless, unsure what to say. Jerome had never tolerated spicy food. He even complained when I cooked something with too much seasoning, but I didn't want to argue, so I just nodded and walked away. A doubt lodged in my chest. A few days later, the sausage had disappeared entirely. I rummaged through the refrigerator, checked the trash, but found no trace. This time, I didn't ask Jerome anything. An uncomfortable feeling, like a block of ice, began to settle within me. Then, one Saturday afternoon, Jerome and I drove to Charleston, South Carolina, to visit some old friends. We left early in the morning and returned late at night. When we entered, the house was as silent as always. I went upstairs to the second-floor bathroom to wash my face and shake off the day's fatigue. But as I stepped inside, I felt something cold and damp. The floor was soaked. Water seeped between my sandals, icy cold. The floor was completely wet, as if someone had just taken a shower. I looked around and saw drops still sliding down the shower walls, shining under the light. My heart hammered loudly. No one had been home all day. How was this possible? I called for Jerome, my voice trembling. "Come here, please." "The bathroom is soaked like someone took a bath." He entered, looked for a moment, and shrugged. "It must have been the afternoon rain that came in through the ceiling vent, my love." I looked out the window. The street in front of the house was dry under the streetlights. "It hasn't rained, Jerome," I said, trying to sound calm. He frowned, slightly annoyed. "Then it must be a leak in the old pipes." "You always worry about nothing. I'll call a plumber tomorrow." But he never called a plumber. In the following days, the bathroom floor was dry, as if nothing had happened. I checked the ventilation grate and the pipes, but everything seemed normal. Jerome's explanation, though reasonable, failed to erase the feeling of unease that was growing inside me. The noises in the attic, the disappeared sausage, the puddle of water with no apparent source. It all seemed like unconnected fragments, but when put together, they formed a contradictory image I couldn't stop thinking about. A week later, I decided to clean Jerome's study. It was his pride, a small room on the second floor with dusty oak bookshelves filled with hundreds of books and old documents. I always thought that someday we should donate some of the books we rarely read to the city library so they could reach the hands of those who needed them. That day, I stood in the middle of the room starting to classify the books on Jerome's desk. There were piles of drafts, notes, and papers stacked chaotically, as if he never intended to organize them. When I lifted a heavy stack, my hand shook and all the papers spilled onto the floor. The sound of the paper falling broke the silence in the room and made me jump. I bent down to pick them up, and right at that moment, a small wooden drawer that had been stuck for years sprang open with a dry click. I hesitated for an instant and looked inside the drawer. There, beneath a pile of yellow drafts, was a small hardback notebook with a dark brown leather cover and worn corners. It looked old. It didn't seem to belong to Jerome. He always liked modern, neat things, laptops, pens, and immaculate white sheets. That notebook with the worn leather cover and a loose cord seemed to be from another era. With a mix of curiosity and dread, I took it in my trembling hands and opened the first page. Inside were pages full of handwritten letters. The calligraphy was soft, elegant, clearly a woman's. I flipped through the pages, skimming them. They were story outlines, character descriptions, plot ideas. There was a fragment that spoke of a small town on the side of a mountain where a woman lived alone, waiting for someone who would never return. Another mentioned a buried secret with details that made my skin crawl. These ideas, although distinct, had a similar air to the plots of Jerome's most famous novels, the ones that gave him his renown. My heart hammered, my throat dry. It couldn't be a coincidence. I know Jerome too well. He hates writing by hand. He always said it was slow and messy, a waste of time. Everything of his, from novel drafts to work notes to shopping lists, he did on the computer. I remember once when I asked him to jot down a restaurant address, and instead of taking the pen next to him, he turned on the computer to write it. So, whose notebook was this? A secret collaborator's? An admirer's gift? I sat in the chair with the notebook weighing heavily in my hands. Part of me wanted to show it to Jerome as soon as he returned. I wanted to hear his explanation, but I hesitated. I know him too well. Jerome always knows how to make everything sound logical. He would smile. He would say it was a gift from a reader or an old idea from when he tried to write by hand. And I, as many times before, would nod and let everything sink into silence. But not this time. I didn't want to let it go. Carefully, I put the notebook back in the drawer and pushed it all the way to the back, as if afraid it would disappear if I didn't keep it hidden. That night, I was sleepless again. Lying in bed, I watched the ceiling and listened to the clock ticking in the dark. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, a slight creaking sound came from the hallway. It was a small noise, but in the silence of the night, it was clearly audible, like an unsettling whisper. I sat up abruptly, my heart racing out of control. I don't know why, but I immediately thought of the small door leading to the attic, the one Jerome and I almost never opened. I got up carefully, without turning on the light, afraid that the brightness would shatter the truth I was about to discover. The faint moonlight entered through the window just enough for me to see a crack. The attic door was ajar. A cold, damp draft descended, bringing with it the smell of old paper and stale air. I stood motionless, my feet glued to the floor. Fear mixed with curiosity paralyzed me. I went back to the room and gently shook my husband's shoulder. "Jerome, wake up. The attic door is open." Jerome groaned, half asleep, and got up with an irritated gesture. He put on his slippers and walked in front of me down the hallway without saying a word. But when we arrived, the door was closed, the latch firmly in place as if no one had touched it. I stood there staring, looking for any sign. A scratch, a crack, nothing. Jerome turned to me with an expression of tiredness and disappointment. "Simone," he said in a grave, exhausted tone, You've been too tense lately. You aren't sleeping well. That's why you see things that don't exist. Come back to bed now." He walked me back. I lay down, but kept my eyes wide open, fixed on the ceiling. For the first time, I began to doubt myself, wondering if I had truly imagined everything. In the following days, since I found the mysterious notebook, I tried to keep everything normal. Although the unease consumed me internally, I began to notice Jerome's every gesture, every look, every word. Lately, he had acquired a new habit that only increased my suspicions. Around 10 o'clock at night, when I was already in bed with a book in my hands, ready to sleep, he would say he had to continue working in the study. "I need to concentrate a little, Simone," he would usually say in a soft but firm voice. "The manuscript is at a complicated part. You go to sleep first." I would nod, smiling. But every time the study door closed, I felt an invisible distance opening further between us. One night, I woke up thirsty. The clock on the table showed almost 1 o'clock in the morning, and the second hand seemed to be counting something in the darkness. I reached out to touch Jerome, but the bed was empty, the sheets cold, as if he had never been there. My heart leaped. A sensation of disquiet ran through my body. Where was he? I put on a thin robe and went out into the hallway, thinking he might have fallen asleep at the desk, as he did sometimes when the pressure from the publisher exhausted him. I walked down the dark hallway. The faint light from the living room projected strange shadows on the walls. I pushed open the study door, but the room was empty. The computer screen was off, the chair perfectly placed beneath the desk, as if no one had been there. I called out softly, "Jerome!" My voice echoed in the silence, but there was no answer. I went down to the kitchen, thinking he might have gone for water, but it was also empty. Only the moonlight entered through the window, making the shadows of the plates on the shelves look like ghosts. I started walking through the house, calling his name, my voice growing shakier. My heart pounded hard, as if sensing that I was about to confront something. As I passed the staircase leading to the second floor, I heard a very soft step, almost imperceptible if I hadn't been paying attention. I looked up, and under the dim hallway light, I saw a silhouette slowly descending. It was Jerome. He was barefoot, walking carefully, as if he didn't want to make the slightest noise. In his hand, he carried a porcelain plate, the kind we used for weekend dinners. When he saw me there, his eyes widened. An expression of surprise crossed his face. The plate slipped from his hands, fell onto the stone floor with a sharp clank, and shattered into pieces. That sound tore through the silence of the night, startled me, and I took a step back. I looked at the fragments, confused. The plate was empty, clean, with no traces of food or grease, as if it had been carefully washed. That only increased my bewilderment. I looked up at Jerome and asked in a trembling voice, "What were you doing up there at this hour?" "I thought you were in the study." He bent down and began picking up the pieces with slow movements, as if trying to buy time to think of an answer. He avoided my gaze and said in a forced tone, I got stuck on the end of the book. The editor won't stop pressuring me, you know. I needed a quiet place, so I went upstairs for a while. I got hungry and went up with some food. I stood there watching him pick up the pieces, unable to fully believe him. I knelt to help him. When our fingers brushed on the cold floor, I felt a shiver of distance. That hand that once gave me comfort now chilled my skin. I knew he was under a lot of pressure from the publisher. The constant calls from Mr. Sterling, his editor, kept him tense. Maybe, I told myself, He just needed space to write. Maybe I was overreacting. The next morning, the house was heavy, as if an invisible cloud floated above us. I woke up tired, my head full of unanswered doubts. Jerome, avoiding looking at me, got up earlier than usual. I heard him silently preparing coffee, the soft clinking of the porcelain, but without the usual good morning. He locked himself in the study, closing the door firmly, and I knew he didn't want interruptions. I stayed in the hallway, looking at that wooden door with a heavy heart. Near noon, Jerome emerged, dressed in a gray suit and carrying a small suitcase. He paused in the living room where I was sitting with a cup of cold tea. "I need to go away for a few days," he said in a flat, emotionless voice. "Maybe I'll go to Atlanta. I need a change of scenery for inspiration." I looked up, surprised. Jerome never left without warning. He always planned everything in advance. He consulted the itinerary with me. "Why so suddenly?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though my heart was pounding. He didn't look at me directly. His eyes were fixed on the window, where the sunlight filtered through the dusty panes. "The idea just came to me suddenly," he replied monotonously. "Be careful while I'm gone." But just before walking out the door, he suddenly turned and placed his hands on my shoulders. His grip was stronger than usual, making me jump. "Simone," he said in a low, serious tone, "while I'm away, don't let anyone in. Do you hear me? Especially no one from the publishing house. If Mr. Sterling, my editor, comes looking for me, tell him I went on a trip and that you don't know when I'll be back." I nodded, but a feeling of unease grew inside me. His words didn't sound like a simple warning, but an order, an alert. Jerome had been gone for about 2 hours when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Mr. Sterling, Jerome's editor, next to a young assistant. Both looked impatient. I hesitated for a moment, my hand on the doorknob, feeling my chest flutter. Jerome's words echoed in my head, but I couldn't stay here without answering. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and forced a smile. Mr. Sterling didn't wait for me to invite him in. He walked straight into the living room with an annoyed expression. "Miss Whitlock," he said in a harsh voice, "I know Jerome is home. Stop covering for him. We need the manuscript urgently. The deadline was 2 weeks ago." Keeping my composure, I repeated exactly what Jerome had asked me to say. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, but Jerome left this morning to seek inspiration. I don't know when he'll return." Mr. Sterling let out an ironic laugh that chilled my blood. He pointed toward the Hamiltons' house, our neighbors across the street. "Don't lie to me anymore," he said sharply. "Mr. Hamilton told me he sees the attic light on until very late every night. If Jerome is working that hard, he should have the manuscript ready, not hiding like this." The young assistant, a girl with kind eyes, intervened. "Ma'am, we just want to help. If Mr. Jerome is going through writer's block, he should talk to us. We can support him." Her tone was gentle, but I could no longer concentrate. Mr. Sterling's words struck me hard. The attic light. I had never noticed that. We almost never went up there. It was full of old boxes and cobwebs. Why would a light be on? And why did Mr. Hamilton say he saw it every night? My heart seemed to stop. I tried to maintain my composure as I walked them to the door, promising to notify Jerome as soon as I had news. But as I closed the door, I leaned against it, trembling. My mind raced. The scattered fragments began to fit together. The noises in the attic, the piece of sausage that disappeared, the puddle in the bathroom, the mysterious notebook, the empty plate, and now the light. It all pointed to the same place. The attic. that forgotten space I hadn't been in for years. I no longer felt fear. Instead, a cold determination began to grow inside me, like a silent flame that pushed me to discover the truth. I went to the backyard shed, where a faint light from the street lamp filtered through the crack in the door. The smell of dust and old oil made me cough. I looked for the old folding ladder that we hadn't used since we moved in. It was heavy, covered in dust and cobwebs, as if time had left it behind. I dragged the ladder down the second-floor hallway, each step weighing me down as if I were carrying all the accumulated suspicions. When I placed it under the hatch leading to the attic, I felt my heart pounding hard, but not from fear. It was an urgency, a certainty that I was about to discover something that would change everything. The metal latch was rusty, so stiff that I had to use all my strength, grit my teeth, and push hard until it gave way. The metal made a sharp click, like a final warning. I lifted the hatch door, and a suffocating, damp current of air descended, bringing with it the smell of old paper and years of confinement. That smell turned my stomach, but I didn't stop. I turned on my phone's flashlight. The cold white light cut through the darkness. I took a deep breath and climbed up. Each rung creaked beneath my feet, as if guiding me toward a world I wasn't prepared for. The attic was larger than I imagined. A dark space full of stacked cardboard boxes, old furniture covered with dusty white sheets, and cobwebs hanging like ghostly curtains. The only light came from a small, dirty window, leaving opaque beams on the wooden floor. I swept the flashlight across the entire space. My heart was beating so fast, it felt like it would jump out of my chest. In the farthest corner of the attic, there was a small, organized space, like an oasis in the middle of the chaos. A wooden table, a chair with a broken leg, and an oil lamp dimly lit, casting a yellowish, almost dying light. And then I saw her, a woman sitting with her back to me. She was thin, with long, white, tangled hair falling over her shoulders like a forgotten cascade. She wore a yellowed white dress with torn edges. The sound of the pencil scratching the paper was the only thing breaking the silence, like a faint heartbeat of life. I stood paralyzed, my throat closed, unable to utter a word. I stammered, "Who? Who is there?" My voice sounded weak, swallowed by the darkness. The pencil stopped. The woman turned her head abruptly. Under the faint lamplight, her gaunt, pale face appeared. Her eyes were sunken, tired, but with something familiar that made me tremble. My world collapsed. My legs gave out, and I had to lean against an old trunk not to fall. It was Alana, my sister, the face I hadn't seen in 30 years, only in dreams and blurry photos. Alana, whom the entire family believed lost forever, was there in the attic of my house in a state that broke my soul. Around her was a small world of secret existence, a huge stack of handwritten manuscripts, several empty cans, rolling water bottles, a dirty blanket on a thin mattress, and an old bucket for her necessities. Everything was living proof of a life in captivity. Alana looked at me, her dry lips trembling. She tried to speak, her voice, as if she had forgotten how. "Sister Simone." She couldn't say more. She just looked at me with eyes full of tears, as if begging for a forgiveness I didn't yet understand. I no longer heard anything. Hot tears welled up and ran down my cheeks. I walked toward her like a sleepwalker, my legs shaking, my head spinning. Alana, my sister, the one I had cried for until my soul was dry, thinking I had lost her forever. Now she was here, alive, like a ghost inside my own home. I took her thin arm. I felt every fragile bone beneath her skin. Come downstairs to the living room, I said between sobs, my voice broken. Come down now, Alana. I helped her stand up. A storm of emotions raged inside me. Joy at finding her, pain at seeing her like this, and fear of the questions screaming in my head. Why was she here? Who had done this to her? And Jerome? What did he have to do with it? I guided her down the stairs. Her every step was unsure, as if her legs didn't remember what it was like to leave that dark attic. The light of the house illuminated her face, highlighting her sunken features and narrowed eyes, unaccustomed to the glare. She looked like a creature of the dark, seeing the sun for the first time, and that broke my heart. Alana, my sister, who once shone like the Savannah sun, was now nothing more than a fragile shadow. I led her to the living room. I carefully sat her down in the most comfortable armchair, where the soft light of a lamp fell upon her like a caress. I rushed to the kitchen, filled a glass with cold water, and with trembling hands brought it to her. Alana tried to hold it, but her hands shook so much that the water spilled. I knelt down, held the glass, and helped her drink sip by sip. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. I didn't want her to see me weak. She needed me to be strong, at least for now. After a few sips, Alana began to cry. It wasn't a soft cry. It was a silent scream, as if all the years of repressed pain were erupting at once. She collapsed onto my shoulder. Her thin body shook, and I could only hold her tight, feeling every vertebrae through her clothes. Alana, who did this to you? Who locked you up? I asked, looking for an answer. My sister's voice came out in a whisper, weak, broken by years of silence. Jerome, she breathed. My husband. The man I had shared 20 years with, the one I thought loved me. The world spun. I looked at Alana, my sister, locked up, treated worse than an animal, and I looked at myself. A woman who had lived a comfortable life without knowing the monster she had next to her. The monster had used my sister's talent to make a fortune. He knew Alana's stories were his best sellers. He knew he couldn't write as well as her. He knew I would recognize her handwriting. He knew he couldn't let anyone get close to her. That's why he locked her up. He kept her captive, giving her food, water, and paper. His biggest secret was that he didn't write his own books. He took her original manuscripts from the attic and rewrote them, putting his own name on them. The truth hit me like a train. I had to be strong for Alana. I told her I would call the police and he would pay for what he did. But Alana shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. No, Simone. Please don't call the police. I don't want to go back to a place like that. I looked at her, understanding her fear. She had been locked up for so long that she was afraid of any new world. I decided to change the plan. I would not call the police right away. I knew I had to act fast, but I couldn't do it alone. If Jerome knew she was free, he would surely come after us. I called the only person I trusted, my childhood friend, Iete. I told her the whole story in a shaky voice. She didn't hesitate for a moment. Simone, bring your sister to my house right now. I'll take care of her. Don't worry, she'll be safe here. I grabbed a small suitcase and began packing some of my clothes and a thin blanket. I helped Alana put on some comfortable clothes and then guided her to the car. She looked around with wide eyes, as if she had never seen the world before. The sky was turning dark. I drove away, driving faster than ever before. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, terrified that Jerome would come after us. I left Alana with Yet, who hugged her with tears in her eyes. She'll be safe here, Simone. You just worry about getting justice for her. I drove to the office of my lawyer, Mr. Davidson. He listened to the story without interrupting, his face getting paler with every word. When I finished, he stared at me, dumbfounded. Simone, this is a serious case. We need evidence. Do you have the original manuscript? The original manuscript. I remembered the heavy stacks of paper in the attic. I had to go back to the house. I had to face my husband and retrieve the manuscript. I called the Hamiltons, my neighbors, who had the key to the main door. I told them I had forgotten my keys and needed to get in. Mr. Hamilton opened the door for me and waited outside. I went straight to the attic, my heart pounding. I pulled down the ladder and climbed up. The air was cold and damp. I found the manuscripts, the stacks of notebooks with Alana's elegant handwriting. I put them in a large box and carried them down. I told Mr. Hamilton I would be leaving the city for a few days and thanked him for his help. Then I drove back to Mr. Davidson's office. He looked at the box, his eyes wide. Simone, this is more than enough. Jerome's career is over. I was ready to face Jerome. I had kept my secret for days, waiting for the perfect moment. That night, Jerome returned. He was tired, his suit wrinkled. He looked at me with a tired smile. I'm sorry for being gone, love. I needed to concentrate on the manuscript. The manuscript you didn't write, Jerome, I said, my voice cold but firm. His smile faded. His eyes narrowed. What are you talking about, Simone? I stood up and walked toward him. I know everything, Jerome. I know about Alana. I know she's alive, and I know you kept her locked up in the attic. His face turned pale, his hands trembling. He looked around as if looking for a way out. Simone, I can explain, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. No, you can't, Jerome. It's over. Just then, 2 police officers and Mr. Davidson entered the living room. Jerome's eyes widened. He tried to run, but the 2 officers put him in handcuffs and led him out, with a look of surprise and terror on his face. He didn't even try to look back. I never saw him again. Alana stayed with Yet for a few days until she was strong enough to face the world. She got psychiatric help, and slowly, she began to get her life back. With the help of Mr. Davidson, Jerome's literary career was ruined. The manuscripts were returned to Alana, who published them under her own name. Her books became bestsellers, and she became a recognized author. Alana found her voice, and I found my conscience. The house, that old, dark house, was too much for me. I sold it and moved to a small apartment near Yet, where I visit Alana often. We talk, we laugh, and we try to catch up on 30 years of lost time. I look at her, my beautiful sister, now free, and I know that I did the right thing. The truth came out, and only when we dare to step out of the darkness are we truly free, and only when the truth is spoken can imprisoned souls finally rest.